Welcome to part 3 of Solace, the final chapter where every lie, every glance, and every unresolved ghost comes crashing into the light. Seo Jin can no longer hide behind the mask of Jin Han. Not with Amara drawing closer to the truth, and Kong Dong-sik circling like a vulture hungry for vengeance. The tender spark between Seo Jin and Amara now balances on a knife's edge, threatened by secrets powerful enough to ruin them both. As danger closes in and old wounds resurface, two hearts must decide whether redemption is worth the cost, or whether Solace was only ever meant to be a fleeting sanctuary. This is the conclusion of Solace, where every choice matters, and the past finally demands its due.
The hour was late, the world outside Solace shrinking to the whisper of wind and the rhythmic hum of traffic blocks away. Inside, the lights were dim, the glow from the counter lamps casting amber pools across the polished wood. Neo-soul curled through the speakers, soft bass, slow heartbeat. Amara moved easily through the quiet, wiping down tables, restocking pastries for the weekend crowd. This was her favorite time, the moment when Solace belonged only to her and the ghosts of her mother's laughter. Outside, the wind picked up. It rattled the cafe's front sign against its chain, catching her attention only for a moment before she hummed along to the music and disappeared into the back storage room to organize a delivery. Through the wide front window, two figures lingered in the shadows of the alley across the street. They watched her silhouette drift past the soft interior light. When she vanished from sight, one gestured to the side door. The other pulled something metallic from his pocket. The faint scrape of metal against lock was swallowed by the wind. The door gave a quiet click. They slipped inside. The men worked quickly, plastic canisters opening with dull snaps, the acrid scent of accelerant filling the air as they poured it across the floor, behind the counter, along the walls, beneath the stage lamp where poetry night always took place. Just as they reached the back hallway, Amara appeared again. She froze mid-step, eyes widening as realization dawned. One of the men caught her stare. A quick shove, hard and final, slammed the storage room door shut before she could scream. The sharp twist of a lock echoed. Then came silence. Amara stumbled backward, heart hammering. "Hey!" she cried through the wood. "What are you doing?" The answer came as the sharp odor of gasoline thickened and then the hiss of a match. Her pulse roared in her ears. "No, no, please!" She grabbed at the handle, pulling with all her strength, but it refused to budge. The music kept playing, the voice of a singer crooning like nothing was wrong as smoke began to snake beneath the door. She yanked open a cabinet, coughing, her trembling hands finding a towel. She pressed it against her mouth, tears blurring her vision. "Oh, God!" The first lick of orange light seeped under the threshold. Heat pressed at her skin. She pounded against the door with her fists, screaming for help, coughing until her throat burned. When the smoke grew too thick, she staggered backward into the corner, clutching the towel over her face, choking, eyes watering. The world shrank to sound, the hum of the fire, the squeal of wood, the drums of her heartbeat. Downtown Seoul. Seo Jin sat in his office, reviewing reports under fluorescent light, when his phone buzzed. An alert flashing from Min Jae's encrypted channel. "Heat on Solace tonight." The words cut through him like ice water. He was already on his feet. The chair toppled backward. "Min Jae!" he shouted into his phone as he sprinted through the hall. "Clear the block! I'm 5 minutes out, do you hear me? 5! The reply was a frantic, "Yes, sir." And the crunch of his tires drowned it out as he tore through downtown traffic, red lights meaning nothing. He drove like every second he lost would kill her, because it would. Smoke plumed against the night sky by the time he reached her street. "God!" He slammed the brakes, twisted out of the car, and sprinted toward Solace. Flames rippled behind the windows, glass cracking under the heat. He didn't think. He just charged. The crash of glass breaking was deafening. Heat slapped his face as he vaulted through, covering his mouth with his sleeve. The air was poison, thick and choking. "Amara!" His voice vanished in the roar. Tables were overturned, fire already crawling up the walls. He moved fast, low, the hem of his coat catching sparks as he shoved through the flame's reach. He found the storage door locked, metal handle searing hot under his palm. He threw his shoulder against it once, twice, then again. The frame splintered. Smoke billowed out, swallowing him whole. Inside, through the blur, he caught a shape curled in the corner, small, trembling. "Amara!" He lunged forward. She flinched as he grabbed her, then froze, recognizing him even through the haze. Her eyes, glossy, terrified, met his. "Come on," he rasped, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, pressing the towel tighter to her face. "We have to go now." They stumbled into the inferno together, flames licking at the ceiling, shards of glass crunching under their feet. The exit blazed ahead like daylight. He pulled her through it, out into oxygen. Minjae appeared out of the darkness, shouting orders to men dousing nearby storefronts with extinguishers. Amara collapsed against Seo-jin as they reached the car, hacking, gasping for air. Tears streaked through the soot on her cheeks. She turned, choking, to stare at the building. Fire curled through the windows like a living thing, devouring everything she'd built. The sign, SOLACE, blackened before her eyes. Minjae grabbed the driver's door. "We need to move, boss! Fire department's on the way, but we can't be seen here!" Seo-jin gathered Amara's trembling hands in his and pulled her toward the passenger seat. She fought for breath, still staring through the window as he started the engine. "My shop," she whispered hoarsely, her palms pressed against the glass. "It's all... everything." Flames reflected in her tear-filled eyes as the car pulled away, the sound of sirens rising behind them. Seo-jin didn't look back. He couldn't. He could still see her mother's photograph in the cafe, now ash, and the poem she once read aloud. "She is rare, like a star that burned before the world had words to name its brilliance." Now everything they'd tried to protect was burning for real. The drive out of the city was a blur of darkness, sirens, and the flicker of red light on wet asphalt. Amara sat curled in the passenger seat, her body trembling in the ruin of quiet sobs. Each choked sound lanced through Seo-jin like shrapnel. He kept both hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, the city sliding past in streaks of amber and blue. He should have spoken, said something to soothe her, but there was nothing left worth saying. What words could bridge the abyss between her loss and his guilt? In the corner of his eye, he watched her rock slowly back and forth, whispering the same broken prayer on repeat. "Oh my God, oh my God." She wasn't crying anymore. The tears had dried into something worse, a hollow rhythm of disbelief. She was lost somewhere in the last hour, trapped in its echo. Amara. The word came out softer than he meant, more plea than call. She blinked, glanced toward him as the car slowed and turned into the long, winding drive that led to his family's estate, a hidden sprawl of stone and light outside Seoul's outskirts. "Where are we?" she murmured, voice flat from shock. "My home," he said quietly, "where I grew up." Her gaze drifted to the towering gates and the house beyond, its windows glowing faintly like a memory. The car rolled to a stop before the broad steps. He stepped out first, opened her door, guiding her gently by the hand. She followed without protest, her eyes glassy, distant. The night air smelled of pine and sea wind from the mountains beyond. Inside, the mansion swallowed them in silence. When the door clicked shut behind them, the sound was final, was like a vault ceiling. Amara stood in the foyer, head bowed, arms wrapping around herself, as if trying to keep her despair contained within her own trembling frame. Her clothes still smelled faintly of smoke, her hair matted by soot. "Come here," Seo-jin said softly. She moved like glass ready to shatter, and when she reached him, she collapsed against his chest. Her sobs broke loose again, raw and uncontrollable. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her with a desperation that ached, that spoke all the words he couldn't say. She cried until her knees nearly gave way, and still he held her, an anchor in a sea of loss he had created. He didn't know how long they stood like that. Minutes, hours, maybe forever. The sound of her grief filled the grand, empty house. Somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, realization overtook him. He was utterly, helplessly in love with her. And that love had burned her world down. He pressed his face into her hair and closed his eyes. The scent of smoke and salt filled his lungs, and beneath them both, a truth whispered like a confession he couldn't speak aloud. Jin Han died tonight with her cafe. Only Seo Jin remained, the man she could never truly forgive once she knew who he was. Still, he held her closer, because in that fragile, suspended moment, love was the only mercy left to give. Amara sat motionless, lungs raw, eyes swollen, her body hollowed out from weeping. She felt like a vessel wrung dry, no more tears, only emptiness. The silence in the cavernous house pressed on her until she almost welcomed the numbness. Then thought returned, sharp, unwelcome. She blinked, straightened a little, and whispered, "Why did you bring me all the way out here instead of home? I need to talk to the police. I have to—" "No police," Seo Jin said, his voice low but unyielding. She turned so abruptly that the room seemed to tremble with her. "What do you mean, no police?" His eyes flickered with something unreadable, and the answer came before he could form it. The pieces she'd been trying not to assemble slid together anyway. Her breath caught. You know who did this." He didn't deny it. That silence was worse than a confession. Her hands flew to her mouth, a small, strangled sound escaping. "They burned down Solace to get to you?" "Amara!" "You!" she cried, backing away from him as though distance might rewrite the truth. "They came after you. I brought you out of the city while my men deal with—" "Your men? What men?" Panic surged through her veins like electricity. "Do these people know where I live?" she gasped suddenly. "Kelly." "Kelly is safe," he said quickly. "She's with Barry. That's why she's been staying there so often. I told him—" "Told him what, Jin?" She nearly shouted the words, heat and disbelief cracking her voice. "Told him what you do. What is it you do, Jin? I want answers. No more lies." "I know." The words dropped out of him, barely audible. Her laugh was sharp and fragile. "You know, that's been the problem, Jin. You've always known, and I've always been in the dark." She prowled the length of the room, her anger and grief tangling into something wild. "All those times, you deflect, disappear, answer the phone in another language, and I wanted so badly to believe that the man I loved just had boundaries. I gave you every benefit of the doubt. But now, I see it. All of it." She stopped, shaking, surrounded by unfamiliar opulence, marble floors, silk drapes, polished portraits. She turned, her gaze snagging on the far wall, family photographs, generations of men in suits with that same indelible bearing of quiet menace. Her stomach twisted. Among them hung one picture, a teenage boy, unsmiling, with the same eyes she knew too well. Amara froze. A brittle breath left her lips. "No," she whispered, stepping closer as recognition pierced her. "Oh my God!" Her hand lifted, trembling, to the glass frame. "Seo Jin?" "I couldn't tell you," came his voice from behind her. Quiet, defeated. "I didn't know how, so I brought you here. I had to show you." She turned, tears springing fresh. The man she'd trusted, the man who'd carried her from the flames, was a stranger now, standing in the ruins of everything she'd believed about him. Her voice cracked as fury and heartbreak fused. "They said your father was one of Seoul's biggest mafia bosses. The principal told my mom we should leave, remember? Before things got dangerous. And now you—" "Amara!" "No!" she snapped, her voice breaking, tears spilling again. "You don't get to say my name." "Please." "Was any of it real?" she demanded. "Or did you just see me one day and decide to ruin what little life I had left?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, Seo Jin spoke, voice low, frayed at the edges. "I hated my life. I hated who I was groomed to be, the violence, the greed. I thought I'd escaped it, But that kind of darkness, he swallowed, it follows you. He stepped closer, though he knew she'd retreat again. Then one night, 15 years after everything, I walked into your cafe. I saw you. His tone trembled but never rose. You were light, the kind I thought didn't exist anymore. You'd grown into everything I wasn't brave enough to become, and for the first time I wanted something different, so I reached out when I should have stayed away. Amara shook her head, tears streaking down her face. I told myself I could protect you, he continued, words spilling faster now, desperate. But I only pulled you into my shadow. Being with you made me remember what it means to want, to dream, to love, and the more of your light I touched, the more it burned me. I thought I could handle it. I was wrong. He stopped, the weight of confession sinking into the vast quiet of the estate's high ceilings. I'm so sorry, Amara. Her shoulders trembled as she looked at him, at the man who had saved her life and destroyed everything else. You should be, she whispered. He didn't try to stop her when she turned away. The echo of her footsteps across the marble floor felt like the final cracks splintering through his chest. When the door opened and closed behind her, the silence swallowed him whole, the kind of silence that only follows when love has turned to embers, and the only thing left to keep is the dark. The next few days dissolved into a haze of silence. Seo-jin had brought Amara to his penthouse because he couldn't bear the thought of her being alone, yet the stillness of the apartment had become unbearable. She had retreated to the guest room that first night and never crossed its threshold again. He checked every morning, every evening. The blinds stayed drawn. Food trays he left outside the door went untouched. When he did glimpse her, she was only a pale silhouette curled beneath the sheets, each day carving deeper shadows under her eyes. She didn't speak. Sometimes he'd stand outside her door long enough to hear the low whisper of her breathing and feel a measure of relief that she was at least still there. She might as well have been a ghost. In the daylight hours, he buried himself in command. His home office became a war room, phones ringing, encrypted messages flashing on screen, measured orders delivered in a tone sharp enough to cut through his grief. Kang Dong-sik's world unraveled in less than 4 days. Warehouses raided, accounts frozen, lieutenants turning on one another. Every strike precise, merciless. He told himself it was justice. But when the calls quieted and the screens went dark, the hollow ache remained. Even victory felt like ash. On the morning of the 5th day, stillness greeted him. The usual drawn curtains were open, pouring gold light across the hallway floor. The air smelled faintly of coffee, cold but made, which startled him. Seo-jin hesitated at the guest room door, then pushed it open. Amara stood near the window, her back straight, the ocean of the city unfolding behind her. The bed was made. Her hair was brushed, her clothes neatly chosen, but the light in her face was distant, muted by grief. The fire that once danced in her eyes had banked into something harder, a glint of resolve wrapped in quiet sorrow. Amara, he began slowly, the relief in his voice barely disguised. She didn't turn. Take me home. He drew a slow breath. Amara, maybe now. The word carried no anger, only finality. He could only nod. The drive back into Seoul felt endless. The streets passed in silence, headlights sliding across their faces in alternating flashes of gold and shadow. Amara said nothing, her gaze locked on the city through the window, as though memorizing a place she no longer belonged to. The music, the wind, even the murmur of traffic felt too loud against the quiet between them. Seo-jin wanted to speak, to ask forgiveness again, to offer explanation, but he knew it would only wound her further. The chasm between them now was wider than any truth he could tell. When they pulled to a stop outside her apartment building, she unbuckled her seatbelt and reached for the handle. Her movement was deliberate, graceful even in weariness. Just before stepping out, she paused, hand on the door, and said without looking at him, "Stay away from me." Her voice didn't tremble. Seo-jin sent a small nod that she couldn't see, because anything more would have broken the fragile control keeping him seated. Amara closed the door behind her. He watched her cross the pavement, the soft sway of her hair, her chin high despite the invisible weight dragging at her shoulders. The building swallowed her up, leaving only the echo of her footsteps. He waited long after she was gone, staring at the empty seat beside him where her warmth still lingered. The words "stay away from me" replaying in rhythm with his heartbeat, sharp, separate, final. For the first time since the fire, he understood what loss truly meant. Not smoke, not ashes, just absence. The weeks that followed Kelly and Barry's move consumed Amara in a haze of busy work. Without solace, her days were shapeless. Grief moved beside her like a second shadow, always there at the edge of her vision. So, when Kelly's wedding began accelerating into full swing, Amara clung to it like driftwood. By day, she was the indispensable maid of honor, the one who smoothed over last-minute vendor disasters and compared color palettes until her eyes ached. By night, the apartment was too quiet. In those hours, she traced worn paths through memories she couldn't let go of. The market lights on Seo-jin's face, his low laugh fading into silence, the feel of his hand guiding her through smoke. The ache was constant but dull, a phantom limb of love. The wedding morning broke bright and golden under a clear Seoul sky. The garden venue was alive with spring, white roses climbing trellises, lanterns swaying lightly in the breeze, sunlight glinting off the shallow pond that bordered the aisle. In the dressing room, only Kelly and Amara remained. Everyone else, friends from SOLACE's, poetry nights, the cafe crew, cousins fluttering in excitement, had already gone ahead. Kelly sat before the mirror, radiant. Her dress was a soft white sheath of silk organza, the bodice adorned with delicate beading that caught the light like dew. A sheer tulle cape draped her shoulders, flowing like breath every time she moved. Her hair was coiled into a crown of twists, a single gardenia tucked behind one ear. She looked like a story Amara had believed in once. Amara exhaled a laugh thick with emotion. "Girl, you look like a whole dream. Seems like just yesterday we were pulling all-nighters in the University of Seoul library." Kelly turned, eyes bright but wet. She dabbed carefully beneath one eyelid. "Don't make me cry and ruin this makeup." Her laugh trembled. "What am I going to do without my best friend?" "You," Amara said, feigning lightness, "are going to live your happily ever after. And you're going to call me every week with all the details so I can live vicariously through you while eating instant ramen." They laughed together, a sound equal parts joy and ache. Then Amara's smile softened, shoulders sinking under the new reality pressing in. "Honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do without you. We've been through so much together. But I guess it's time we do some things apart." Kelly reached for her hands. "Don't worry, you're always going to be my sis." A mischievous twinkle lit her eyes. "And as your sister—" "Oh no," Amara groaned, smiling despite herself. "Not one of your truth bombs." "Hey, it's my wedding day," Kelly teased. "Special day for love and truth. So here it is, the truth. Your man of mystery may not have been Prince Charming, but you can't tell me he didn't love you. Everyone saw it. He'd turn his life upside down if it meant keeping you." Amara opened her mouth, closed it. 100 arguments fluttered through her chest before she managed a wry, "Let's table my tragic romance for another day, shall we? This is about you." Kelly grinned, squeezing her friend's hands. Okay, but don't let your own happily ever after slip away." Amara lifted both palms in surrender. "Noted. Now come on, Bridezilla, we've got a wedding to start." The ceremony unfolded in sunlight and wind. Kelly walked down the flower-strewn aisle to gentle guitar music, Barry's grin as wide as the open sky. Guests dabbed tears, cameras clicked softly. When they vowed to love fiercely through the miles and the years, Amara's heart pinched with an ache she refused to name. After vows and laughter came the reception, intimate and golden under strings of fairy lights. Tables gleamed with candles and glass. The air was heavy with jasmine and music. When the toasts began, Amara stood, smoothing her simple emerald dress and clutching her note card. The crowd hushed. Kelly beamed through happy tears. Amara took a deep breath and began. What time cannot take. Time can weather the sweetest words, can soften laughter into memory, can fade colors and names and the pulse of a moment. But love endures the rust and rain. It grows through the cracks, finding sun in the smallest places. It bends, but it will not break. It echoes even after the song is finished, still dancing in the silence we leave behind. So when years stretch long and hearts grow tired, may you remember, time can take many things, but never the truth of how you loved. Her voice wavered only once near the end when she caught Kelly's gaze. Pure affection, gratitude, sisterhood. When she finished, the guests rose, clapping, glasses lifted high in celebration of love that refused to yield to years or distance. Amara smiled with them, raising her glass toward the bride and groom. But when the chorus of cheers rippled over the garden, her focus drifted past the glittering lights to the row of trees beyond the fence. For a heartbeat, she saw him there, Seo Jin. Dressed simply, the city's glow behind him, face half obscured by shadow but unmistakably. Him, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Her breath caught in her throat. Someone called her name, breaking her trance, and she blinked. When she looked again, he was gone. Only the wind moved through the trees, stirring the lanterns. The flutter in her chest softened into something familiar, half hope, half ache. She lifted her glass once more, whispering to herself through the fading echo of applause. What time cannot take. The apartment felt quieter than usual, as if even the city beyond the window had run out of sound. Kelly and Barry were gone, off to new beginnings under American skies, and for the first time in months, Amara had nothing left to distract her. She sat curled on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, staring at the coffee mug cooling on the table. The clock's ticking echoed through the room. Then came a knock. She blinked, startled. It was late afternoon, the sunlight fading into a bruised gold. Dragging herself up, she opened the door. A courier stood there holding a plain brown envelope. Ms. Amara Carter? Yes. He handed it to her, gave a brief nod, and left before she could ask questions. Inside was a single silver key and a thick stack of legal documents. Her eyes traced the heading, Property Transfer Agreement. The owner's name, Amara Carter. The address, unfamiliar. Her brow furrowed. Some sort of mistake? But curiosity rose stronger than doubt. Throwing on her jacket, she grabbed her bag and headed for the listed address. Twilight caught up with her as she reached the street, a quiet lane on the city's edge. The storefront before her looked impossibly familiar. Her breath hitched as she read the sign above the door, painted in the same script she had once chosen years ago. Solace. Her reflection wavered in the glass. The sun poured through it just so, bouncing across the polished wood floors. Hands trembling, she turned the key and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Coffee, cinnamon, cedar, so precise she nearly sobbed. Tables lined up in the same arrangement, the same mismatched chairs, the same soft lamps glowing against amber walls. The sound system hummed low with her favorite jazz playlist. It wasn't possible, and yet, here it was. She moved slowly through the space, fingertips gliding along the counter, the polished edge of a table. In the corner stood the tall bookcase, her old one reborn, filled not with a jumble of poetry volumes but rows of identical books. Curiosity overcame the shock. She pulled one free, opened it, and air caught in her throat. Inside were her words, printed on creamy paper, embossed with her name. Amara Carter, What Time Cannot Take, and other poems. She flipped through trembling pages until she reached the final piece, the same one she'd read aloud at Kelly's wedding. Her voice broke as she whispered it under her breath, tears spilling freely. Time can take many things, but never the truth of how you loved. The faint jingle of the doorbell broke her reverie. Amara turned, still clutching the book to her chest. Seo Jin stood just inside the doorway. No guards, no tailored suit, just a man in simple clothes, shoulders squared yet heavy with something like humility. He took a careful step toward her. "This place, it's yours," he said softly. "Completely yours. Free, protected. You'll never have to worry again." She couldn't speak, only stare. He swallowed hard, his voice roughening. "You'll never have to see me again if that's what brings you peace. I only wanted to give back what I destroyed." He turned as if to leave, every movement restrained, like it cost him to walk away. "No." Her voice wavered, small but clear. He froze. "I don't want you to go." He turned slowly. The air between them seemed to hum. Tears welled again, but her eyes no longer looked haunted, only raw, vulnerable. "I miss you," she whispered. He crossed the floor before she could blink. For a heartbeat, they simply stood there, the smell of roasting beans and paper and memory wrapping around them. He brushed away one tear that slipped down her cheek, his hand trembling slightly against her skin. Then he kissed her. Soft at first, tentative, the kind of kiss born of sorrow and forgiveness. But it deepened quickly, pulled by all the grief, anger, and longing they'd carried alone. She melted against him, her arms sliding around his shoulders, anchoring them both in the middle of the room that had once symbolized everything lost, and now, impossibly, returned. Outside, evening light spilled through the windows, gilding the walls of the new SOLACE. And for the first time in so long, Amara finally breathed without breaking.
In this final conclusion of SOLACE, every secret breaks the surface, every emotion finds its truth, and the journey that began with a single cup of coffee comes full circle. If you've been swept up in the tension, the tenderness, and the redemption woven through SOLACE, make sure to like and subscribe to hear more romance stories filled with aching hearts, second chances, and unforgettable connections.